What happens when the person you trust most slowly rewrites your reality? This story isn't just about betrayal, it's about emotional manipulation, denial, and the moment a woman finally sees the truth. Pregnant, vulnerable, and dismissed as overreacting, she begins to realise her marriage was never what it seemed. And when clarity arrives, it doesn't just hurt, it transforms everything.
7 months into her pregnancy, Eleanor heard her husband say something that shattered her world. She needs the Lakeview suite, Julian insisted, not for Eleanor's care, but for his mistress's comfort. Eleanor was unaware of the $5 million insurance policy Julian had recently taken out on her life. She also didn't know her father, a top Chicago surgeon, was already investigating Julian's deceptions. But fate had a twist. 3 weeks later, Julian would suffer a major cardiac event. The one surgeon available would be the father of the wife he betrayed. This is a tale of infidelity and perfect irony. "She needs the Lakeview suite," echoed in the sterile hallway. Eleanor blinked, trying to process the words. The rhythmic beeping of her monitor was a stark contrast to the chaos in her heart. Surely she had imagined it. Eleanor adjusted herself on the stiff pillow, a sharp pain shooting through her back. At 7 months pregnant, her blood pressure was dangerously high, 160 over 105. The diagnosis was severe preeclampsia. Bed rest was not a suggestion, it was a command. Her baby kicked fiercely. "Julian," she murmured weakly. "What was that about?" Her husband appeared, his tailored suit perfect. His jaw was tense, a look she'd come to fear. A young woman was with him in a wheelchair, Chloe Sterling, a 26-year-old architect from his firm. Her makeup was impeccable, as was her hair. She wore a designer scarf Julian had once called extravagant when Eleanor admired it. Chloe cradled a bandaged wrist from a supposed fender bender. It was a minor sprain, hardly cause for admission. "She requires absolute quiet," Julian stated, his tone cold and transactional. "The other rooms won't do. My associate needs to recover." Eleanor looked at the man she'd married, the father of her unborn child. He once wept with joy at the news of her pregnancy. "Julian, I have complications," she whispered, the words feeling alien. "My pressure is critical. The doctor said any stress is dangerous." He approached, his expensive cologne overwhelming her. It was the scent she'd bought for their anniversary, a gift she saved months for. "You're overreacting," he said, his words a physical blow. "Your vitals are stable. Chloe is the one in actual pain." The baby kicked urgently, a frantic signal. "Please, Julian," Eleanor pleaded, hating the weakness in her voice. "The baby needs me here. Dr. Sharma was explicit about the dangers." Chloe fidgeted in her chair. The other woman avoided Eleanor's gaze, studying her perfect manicure. "Julian, perhaps we should go," Chloe whined softly. "This feels wrong." "Nonsense," he snapped, his knuckles white on the wheelchair. "My wife can wait in the lounge, it's fine." An icy dread filled Eleanor's chest. It was a familiar feeling, one that surfaced during his late nights and unexplained absences. He always had an excuse for the late hours or the foreign perfume. He always made her feel crazy. But this was different. This was about her child's life. "Who is she, Julian?" Eleanor's quiet question filled the tense room. For a brief moment his composure failed, then annoyance replaced it. "She's my protégé. I'm her mentor, and I'm helping her after an accident." "Your protégé needs my hospital room, my bed?" Eleanor's voice gained strength. "Don't turn this into a drama, Ellie," he warned. Just then, the door swung open. Dr. Anya Sharma entered with a chart. She had guided Eleanor through 2 prior losses. Her gaze swept over Eleanor, then Julian, and finally settled on Chloe in the wheelchair. The silence was heavy for a long moment. "Is there a problem here?" Dr. Sharma asked, her tone level but her eyes sharp. Julian turned on his practiced charm, the same charm that one deals in her heart. "Just a family matter, doctor. Nothing for you to be concerned about." Dr. Sharma placed the chart down firmly. "Mrs. Vance is my patient, and her condition is precarious. She is not to be moved," the doctor stated. "This is a private issue," Julian repeated. Dr. Sharma's eyes flickered to Chloe. "I understand." Eleanor's hands shook under the blanket as she felt their stares. To end the humiliation, she mumbled, "It's fine. I'll go." "Absolutely not," Dr. Sharma said, stepping between Julian and the bed. "Moving you risks a seizure," Dr. Sharma insisted. "The baby is in danger." "I'll go," Eleanor repeated, throwing off the covers. Her legs were unsteady. The monitor blared as her pressure spiked to 152/98. She stood, desperate to avoid a public scene, a part of her still hoping this wasn't real. She clutched her stomach. The baby moved against her hand. A small comfort. She whispered silent, untrue reassurances. Eleanor walked past Julian and the other woman, who refused to meet her eyes. The thin gown did little to warm her. Her bare feet slapped the cold floor. In the hall, her knees nearly gave out. Behind her, Julian's smooth voice began explaining the situation to the doctor, twisting the facts. She kept moving down the impossibly long corridor. Staff hurried by, oblivious to her plight. She heard a newborn cry, a sound of another family's happiness. She had nowhere to turn. Pregnant, sick, and now discarded by her husband for another woman. The harsh lights hummed above as the walls seemed to close in. She fought back tears, refusing to break down in public. "You're overreacting," Liam had insisted, as if she were a child, as if their daughter was an inconvenience, as if 5 years of history and a hard-won pregnancy meant nothing. Alara froze mid-step on the plush carpet. She leaned against a display of silk crib sheets. She shut her eyes. The baby fluttered inside her, a persistent, demanding little pulse. "I know," Alara thought, her palm flat against her stomach. "I know, my love. Mommy will handle this. Mommy always handles things." But standing in that opulent Boston boutique, with her pulse racing and her world splintering, Alara couldn't imagine how she would ever handle anything again. She understood only that a vital connection had snapped, something irreparable that would irrevocably alter her future. Her marriage was a mirage. She just hadn't seen it clearly until now. The antique clock on the wall showed 4:18 in the afternoon. In precisely 40 days, Liam Sterling's tech empire would face a hostile takeover. He would be desperate for a capital infusion. He would be forced to seek an emergency investment. And the only venture capitalist with deep enough pockets to save him would be the mother of the woman he had just shattered. But Alara didn't know that yet. All she knew was the soft fabric at her back, the life inside her, the echo of her own breaking heart, and the sickening certainty that nothing would ever be right again. The boutique manager, Sophia, found her 9 minutes later. Alara was clutching a display case. Her knuckles were bone white, her breath hitched in tiny, painful spasms that made her ribs ache. The baby was now a frantic acrobat, mirroring her mother's panic with sharp, uncomfortable jabs. "Oh, my dear." Sophia's voice was soft, firm, and filled with an awful understanding. "Oh, this is not right. Come with me now." Sophia Rossi had managed this exclusive children's boutique for 30 years. She had seen it all in that time. She had seen new fathers cry with joy over a pair of tiny shoes. She had seen grandmothers spend a fortune celebrating a first grandchild. She had witnessed quiet acts of incredible generosity. She had seen moments of private grief that lingered with her for years, but she had never witnessed a scene of such cold dismissal. She had been at the front counter when Liam Sterling arrived with that young woman. She saw how his hand lingered on the curve of Chloe's waist. Proprietary, intimate. She'd heard him ask if his wife had arrived for her private appointment. She watched him guide the other woman toward the jewelry store next door. She knew instinctively what was unfolding, and she had been powerless to prevent it. "This way, sweetheart," Sophia said now, her strong hand on Alara's arm. "I have my office in the back. It's quiet. No one will disturb you there. Let's get you some water and let you sit for a moment." Alara allowed herself to be led. Her legs felt disconnected from her body. Her thoughts were a thick fog, blurring the world around her. The gentle chime of the door, the scent of lavender potpourri, the hushed murmurs of the staff. She was not all right. She might never be all right again. The office was small and tasteful. A plush armchair, a window facing a quiet back alley, A large oak desk covered in sketches of tiny dresses and fabric swatches. Sophia guided Alara to the chair with a practiced gentleness. She brought a glass of cool water. Still too high, but better than before. Just breathe, Jolene said, her voice steady and calm. Nice and slow. In through your nose, out through your mouth. There you go. Just like that. Carolyn breathed in through her nose, out through her mouth, the way they had taught her in the birthing class at the community center, the class Derek had missed 3 times because of late meetings and business dinners. I need to tell you something, Jolene said after a long moment. Her voice had changed, softer now, heavier, and I am sorry I did not say it sooner. I should have said something weeks ago. Carolyn looked up at her. The nurse's face was weathered by years of long shifts and difficult decisions. Kind eyes, strong jaw, an expression full of something that looked like regret. This isn't the first time I've seen them, Sophia said quietly. Chloe has been in here with him before, a few times over the past couple of months. Alara felt the words land like stones in her stomach, one after another. I manage the appointments, Sophia continued. I know his name. I know your name. I saw them together last month. She always asks about items for a baby boy. Always seems disappointed when I mention our upcoming girls' collection. Every time. He always brings her in after hours. Always checks the street to make sure no one is around. Always comes up with a story about a gift for a client or a colleague. Ilara's throat went dry. She could taste acid. The elegantly decorated office seemed to sway. How long have you known? Sophia looked at her own hands, twisting a small silk ribbon. Hands that had helped dress thousands of infants in their first outfits. I suspected for months. The way he would look over his shoulder, the excuses he'd make to take calls outside. The way he always paid in cash for her purchases. But I didn't have any real proof, not until last week. She came in alone asking for Mr. Sterling's special order. She said she needed to pick it up for their trip to Aspen. Sophia stopped. She said the trip was a celebration, their 1-year anniversary. The world tilted. Alara gripped the arms of the chair to keep from falling. Their anniversary. Liam and Chloe had an anniversary. A day they observed? A private tradition? How long? How long had she been living this lie? I'm not crazy, Alara whispered, the sound raw and desperate. I knew something was wrong. I felt it. I asked him so many times if we were okay. You are not crazy, Sophia stated. Her tone was absolute, a shield. You are not needy. You are not imagining things. And you are most certainly not overreacting. The office door opened. Liam's sister, Clara, stood there, her expression a mask of dawning horror and old guilt. She held a gift bag in one hand. I've been trying your phone, she started, then stopped. She saw Alara's face. She knew. I have told him to end it, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I have confronted him a dozen times. I documented every lie he told me, every promise he broke. Alara heard the confession through a haze. The words were clear, but they couldn't cut through the static in her mind. How long have you known, she asked. Known what? About her? About Chloe? How long has my own family known? The silence that followed was a confession. Clara sank into the other chair, looking defeated. I have been your friend for 10 years, Alara. I was your maid of honor. I held your hand when you lost the first baby at 10 weeks. I cried with you when you lost the second at 16 weeks. I was the first person you called from the clinic, whispering that you were finally truly pregnant. I remember it all. 4 months ago you brought Liam to that family dinner. The one where you announced you were having a girl. The one where we celebrated with champagne for us and sparkling cider for you. Alara nodded. The day was a perfect sunlit memory. Now it was tainted. Liam had been so attentive. He had toasted their daughter. He had his arm around her the entire night. After dinner, I saw him in the driveway, near the old oak tree. He was on his phone, arguing with someone. He was angry enough that I could hear him from the porch. What was he saying? Clara flinched. I heard him say that this pregnancy was making things difficult, that he needed more time, that she just had to be patient. And you never told me. Clara's composure finally broke, tears spilling down her cheeks. I wanted to, Alara. I swear I wanted to tell you every day, but I kept hoping I misunderstood. I kept hoping he would be the man I thought he was. I kept hoping he would choose his family before the baby came. There was no innocent version of this story. There never was. Alara thought of Liam's company gala 2 months ago. The glittering lights and string quartet, the table full of his executives and their smiling wives. Chloe had been there. Liam introduced her as a brilliant new consultant who was revolutionizing their brand. She had smiled at Alara, praised her maternity gown, and said how much she admired their family. Alara saw it all now, with brutal clarity. The way Chloe's hand brushed Liam's back when she thought no one could see. The way his mother, Patricia, gave her a hug that felt stiff and obligatory. The sudden lulls in conversation when she approached a group. They all knew. Liam's family knew. His closest colleagues knew. His sister knew. Everyone knew but her. I'm not crazy, Alara said again. The words were stronger now, forged in ice. I saw it. I felt the distance. I asked the right questions. I just refused to see the truth. You loved your husband, Clara whispered. That's not a weakness. That is what you were supposed to do. No. Alara's voice was sharp. Something inside her had fractured and reformed into something harder. The haze of disbelief was finally lifting. Her mistake wasn't in her trust, but in his betrayal. She met her lawyer's gaze over the video call. I need a complete record. Every file from that shared drive, every word he uttered, every move he made tonight. I want financial statements and medical records going back to the first day of my pregnancy, and I want to know exactly how long my husband has been sleeping with his junior architect. Find it all. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths. For months, Amelia had ignored the warning signs. Late nights at the studio, design conferences that consumed entire weekends. How he no longer reached for her, how his touch became hesitant. The private smiles he saved for his phone. She had chosen hope over reality, and it had made her a fool. No longer. The baby kicked, a series of sharp, determined jabs. Amelia rested a hand on her stomach, feeling the life within. It's all right, Sophia, she murmured. Mommy's eyes are open now. She was finally seeing with perfect clarity. Sophia. She had never told Julian the name she had chosen. She'd been saving it for a perfect moment, a fantasy she now knew was built on a foundation of lies. Sophia Grace. After the formidable women in her family who built empires and never bowed to any man. Sophia would never know her father's brand of deceit. She would never be fooled by his hollow words or feel this gut-wrenching pain. Amelia would shield her from that. He is not going to win, Amelia stated, her voice now firm. He will not break me. That's the spirit, her sister replied on the phone. You're more powerful than he imagines. I'll get through this for her, Amelia vowed, pressing her hand to her belly. For both of us. The truth was agonizing, but beneath the shock, a new feeling emerged. It was the terrifying, beautiful freedom of knowing. Amelia's phone vibrated at 4:17 the next afternoon. The screen lit up the darkened room, her father's name glowing. Robert Thorne was a man who never showed weakness. As a titan of New York real estate, he'd navigated hostile takeovers and market crashes with unshakable calm. His composure was legendary. But when Amelia answered, she heard a note of something in his voice she hadn't heard since she was a child. It was a sound that chilled her to the bone. Sweetheart, his voice was strained. I just spoke with your sister. Amelia was speechless, the words caught in her throat. I'm on my way. Your mother is with me. We're wheels up in 10 minutes and should land in Boston in an hour. Still she remained silent, the previous night's discovery having robbed her of speech. I need you to listen to me, Robert insisted, his dealmaker's voice taking over. Can you do that for me, Amelia? Yes, Daddy, she whispered. Her voice was small, a ghost of her childhood self. You are not alone in this. Whatever happens next, you and that baby are coming home with us, do you understand? The tears she had fought back finally fell hot and fast. Daddy, she choked out. He chose her, Chloe. He said I was overreacting when I found the photos. He said her project deadline was more important than our child. I know. Your sister told me everything. How long has this been happening? Did everyone know? The silence on the line stretched for a long 5 seconds. We'll talk when I arrive, Robert said finally, his tone shifting to something hard and resolute. Just stay put. Take care of yourself and my granddaughter. Your mother and I will handle the rest. He ended the call. Amelia stared at her own reflection in the blank screen, a hollow-eyed stranger looking back. His voice at the end had changed. It wasn't worry, it was certainty. The sound of a man who had been expecting this call. 53 minutes later, Robert and Eleanor Thorne swept into the Beacon Hill townhome. Robert wore a tailored suit, looking as if he'd just stepped out of a boardroom. Eleanor, though her perfect blonde hair was uncharacteristically simple, stood tall, her expression one of cold fury. She saw her daughter, pale and fragile, clutching her stomach as if to shield the baby inside. Eleanor's eyes turned to ice. "Where is he?" she demanded. "Mom, don't!" "Where is he, Amelia?" Robert placed a steadying hand on his wife's arm. "Not yet, my love. First we secure Amelia and the baby, then we dismantle Julian." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a slim, encrypted tablet. "I have something to show you," Robert said, his voice grim. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I hoped I was wrong." "What is that?" Amelia's heart began to race. "After your company's last investor meeting, I had my financial analyst look into Julian's expense reports. Something felt off." The words hit Amelia like a physical blow. "You investigated him?" "I saw the way he and that young architect Chloe interacted. I saw how your friends went silent when you approached. The small things added up to a very ugly picture." Robert tapped the screen, bringing up files. Financial statements, offshore account transfers, digital receipts circled in red. Julian has been financing Chloe's life for over a year. He pays the lease on her Seaport condo, a 2-bedroom unit for nearly $3,000 a month. He bought her a new Tesla. He took her to Milan for a design expo in March, when he told you he was visiting a project site in Denver. Amelia took the tablet with shaking hands. The images were sharp and clear. The first was of Julian and Chloe at a gala, his arm possessively around her waist. They were smiling. A perfect power couple. She saw the date stamp in the corner. It was her birthday. He had called her that evening, saying a zoning board meeting was running late. She had eaten her birthday dinner alone while her husband was celebrating with his mistress across town. "More," Robert said, his voice strained. "But it can wait until you're stronger, until you've had a chance to absorb this." "Tell me now. I have to know all of it." Olivia glanced at her mother, Helen. A look passed between them, a silent conversation built on 30 years of love. "Ethan's family helped him hide it for months," Helen said, her tone smooth as glass. "His sister, the realtor, found Chloe the condo. She used a shell company to hide the payments from Ethan's personal accounts. They all knew. Ethan's mother, his father, his sister, her husband, they all smiled at you over brunch while covering his tracks. The sense of betrayal was a venom, spreading through Olivia's chest. A sickness that would consume her from within. Ethan's parents had held her at the baby shower, gifting a silver rattle for their future grandchild. They toasted her health, all while knowing their son was shattering his wife's world, piece by piece. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Olivia asked, her voice fracturing. "I deserve to know. I had a right," she whispered. Robert leaned in, taking her hand just as he did when she was 7, and scared of the dark. When she was 15, heartbroken over a boy. When she was 23 and terrified of starting her career at the gallery. "I wanted you to have options," he said. "I didn't want you to feel cornered. I worried if I told you while you were pregnant, you might feel trapped with no way out. What options do I have now? More than you realize. I have a complete file. Bank records, travel itineraries, text logs, photos. Enough to ensure you get everything in the divorce. Enough to protect you and Sophie from whatever Ethan tries next. Divorce. The word was a heavy stone in the room. Final, real. I also believed Ethan might end it himself, Robert added. I thought the reality of fatherhood would be a wake-up call. I hoped he'd find his conscience before the baby came and we would never need this conversation. He didn't find it. No, he became more reckless. Olivia looked at the photos again. Ethan smiling, Ethan laughing, looking more alive than he had with her in years, if ever. She thought of all the times she'd felt a flicker of doubt and pushed it away. The late nights at the startup that went past 1 a.m, the investor meetings that consumed entire weekends, the way he stopped touching her stomach when she talked about the baby, the way he winced when she said, "I love you," the vacant stares at dinner, the way he guarded his phone, the slight smile that touched his lips when a certain notification popped up. She wasn't an idiot. She was in love. And love had made her blind. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked. Her voice was small, a child's voice in a world that had suddenly tilted off its axis. Helen knelt by her side. Her perfume smelled of hydrangeas and the sea, of their summers on the Cape. It smelled of every safe memory Olivia had. "You come home," Helen said, her voice fierce. "You rest. You take care of yourself and our granddaughter. Then you divorce that man and take back your life." "I don't know if I'm strong enough to do this." "You are." Helen's tone left no room for argument. "You are a Lowell. We don't break, we don't bend, and we never let a man make us feel small. Your great-grandmother marched for suffrage. Your aunt started a company when they said a woman couldn't. You come from a line of women who refuse to be broken." Robert squeezed Olivia's hand. "Your mother is right. You deserve far better than what Ethan gave you, and we will make sure you get it." The baby kicked, a hard, insistent pulse. Olivia closed her eyes, counting the kicks as her doctor had taught her. 1, 2, 3, 4. Strong kicks, fighter's kicks. "Can I have a few minutes?" she asked. "I need to think. I just need to process all of this." Her parents shared another look and nodded. "We'll be just outside the door," Robert said. "Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere." They slipped out, the door clicking softly behind them. The room was silent, save for the beep of the fetal monitor. Olivia sat with the quiet. The sun cast long shadows across the hospital floor. The monitor kept its steady rhythm. The baby moved inside her. She started counting things, a trick she used when the world felt too big. The beige tiles on the ceiling, 12 of them, the petals on the silk flowers on the nightstand, too many to count. She started over. Numbers were clean. Numbers didn't have hidden meanings. Numbers were true. Ethan lied. His parents lied. His sister lied. They all lied. But the numbers were always true. Olivia placed a hand on her belly, feeling Sophie shift under her skin, a tiny foot pressing against her. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to her daughter. "I'm so sorry I chose wrong. I chose a man who wasn't worthy of being your father. But I'll choose better now. I promise you that, Sophie. I will choose better." The clock on the wall ticked. Each second was a step away from her old life, a step toward a future she couldn't see. Olivia didn't know what it would look like. She didn't know how she would get through this. She knew nothing. But she knew one thing for sure. She would not let Ethan Vance ruin her. She would not let him have the last word. Not now, not ever. Ethan Vance showed up at 7:15 that night. He burst into the private waiting area where Robert and Helen sat on either side of Olivia, like guardians at a gate. His expensive designer hoodie was rumpled. His hair was a mess, as if he'd been dragging his hands through it. "This is a private matter," he announced, his voice booming with the arrogant authority of a tech CEO used to getting his way. Robert didn't stand up or raise his voice. He just looked at Ethan with the same calm, dissecting gaze he once used on the bench. "Sit down, Ethan. You don't get to order me around. Olivia is my wife. This is our life, our family. You have no right to interfere. Sit down." Something in Robert's tone cut through Ethan's bluster, and he obeyed. He'd heard it once before, the night he'd asked for Olivia's hand. Robert had said yes, but his eyes had delivered a silent warning. I see you. I know exactly who you are, and if you ever hurt her, you will regret it. Ethan dropped into a chair, his jaw tight. His eyes darted between Olivia and her parents, calculating, looking for an angle. Olivia's moving back home, Robert said evenly. She'll stay with us through the birth, maybe after. Her lawyer will have the divorce papers sent to you this week. Ethan let out a hollow laugh, a desperate sound. You're not serious. This is a massive overreaction. My assistant needed some help, and Olivia's hormones are making her paranoid. It's an innocent misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, Helen repeated, her voice pure ice. Is that your story? She unlocked her phone, found a photo, and turned the screen toward Ethan. It was him and Chloe in Aspen, snow-capped mountains behind them. His arm was wrapped around her waist, his hand resting on her stomach. Aspen, Helen said. The 11th through the 18th of March this year. The Little Nell, in the private chalet that cost $2,000 a night, while your pregnant wife thought you were at a tech conference in Austin. On your anniversary, Ethan's face went white. The confident smirk vanished. That photo could be altered. It doesn't prove anything. Actually, we can prove everything, Robert said. He opened a leather portfolio and laid out its contents on the table. Bank statements showing wire transfers to Chloe's personal account totaling over $60,000. The deed to her condo, co-signed by your holding company. Registration for the new Tesla you bought her. And encrypted text messages retrieved by a forensics expert from a server you thought was secure. He arranged the documents in a neat, damning line. 18 months of deceit sat on the screen. Liam stared at the phone. His mouth was a thin, hard line. She was expecting, wasn't she? Eleanor's voice was like ice. Isabella miscarried 3 months ago. The blood drained from Liam's face. We know about that, Eleanor stated. We know you pushed her to end it and paid a private clinic in cash. We know it all, Liam. Every sordid little secret. The air in the room grew thick. 10 seconds passed, then 15. Liam looked at Chloe, his eyes flashing. She knew that look. It was his damage control face from when a big deal soured. Chloe, listen. His voice turned soft, pleading. This isn't how it seems. Isabella was nothing, a foolish lapse in judgment. Which part was the lapse, Liam? Chloe's voice was unnervingly calm. The 18 months you spent with her, the trips to the Keys, or getting her pregnant. She told you. Your father's forensic accountant told me. He also found the condo you bought her, the car, the jewelry you put on our business account, the dinners, the flights, all of it. For a second, Liam's smooth facade cracked. The devoted husband vanished. Underneath was someone cold, calculating, someone she'd never let herself see. You had me investigated, he snapped. The plea gone, replaced by outrage. That's a massive breach of my privacy. It's illegal. I could take you to court. Her father, Robert, let out a dry laugh. You're free to try. This is insane. Liam paced the room, agitated. Chloe, be reasonable. Think of what this means. Think of our son. He needs his father. You can't just cut me out. Our son needs a father who respects his mother, Chloe replied. He needs a dad who keeps his vows, not one who misses his baby's critical ultrasound for a weekend with his mistress. That was a mix-up, and I told you that. Isabella was having a crisis. I was helping a friend. You were helping your girlfriend while your wife was dealing with a high-risk pregnancy. While our son's health was uncertain, you twist everything. You always make things seem dark. 18 months isn't a simple mistake. It's a series of choices. Every day for 18 months, you chose her over us. You chose her over our son. Liam stopped, his jaw tight. You changed, he said, his voice cold. After you got pregnant, you became someone else. Always exhausted, always anxious, nagging me about doctors and nursery designs. You stopped caring about me, about my life. You weren't fun anymore. You were not the woman I fell for. Chloe just looked at him. She'd seen this script before. The cheater shifts the blame, making the wronged party responsible for their betrayal. But hearing it from Liam, the man whose child she carried, felt like a physical blow. "I was growing our son," Chloe said, her words measured and heavy. "I was tired because my body was building a life. I was anxious because I wanted him to be safe. I talked about nurseries because I was trying to make a home for him, see?" Liam threw his hands up. "It was always the baby. Everything was about him, never about us. You wanted me to choose between you and him before he was even here. You wanted me to put your ego before our child's needs. That's not what I said. You're putting words in my mouth again. That is precisely what you meant." Chloe rose to her feet, feeling steadier than she had in months. The doctor had cleared her for light activity, and her parents' home was a sanctuary. This marriage was not. "I want you out of this house," Chloe said, her voice firm. "I want you out of my life. You can't do this. I'm his father. I have rights. You missed our son's ultrasound to be with your pregnant girlfriend. You put her minor drama before his potential health crisis. Do you really think a judge will find that reasonable?" Liam's mouth opened and closed. For the first time, Liam, the master negotiator, was speechless. Robert stood, seeming to gain height. "I think my daughter told you to leave. This isn't finished. I won't let you ruin my life." "You already did that," Robert said quietly, 18 months ago. "My daughter is just handling the consequences." Liam gave Chloe a final, searching look. He was looking for the old Chloe, the one who always forgave him. That woman was gone. "You'll regret this," he snarled. "All of you." He stormed out, the front door slamming behind him. A heavy silence filled the room. "It's done," she whispered. "Almost," Robert said. "There's one more thing." He produced another file. Inside was a legal document, a power of attorney agreement. Liam had tried to get her to sign it weeks ago. The beneficiary of her controlling shares in their joint real estate venture was Liam. The reason cited was her pregnancy. The baby kicked, and Chloe knew with chilling certainty she hadn't just married a cheat, but a predator. The news of their split ignited through Miami's elite circles. Within 2 days, Liam's phone was buzzing. His mother, Victoria, called, then his father, then his business partners. Not one of them called Chloe. They called to contain the fallout. Victoria Whitmore arrived at Robert and Eleanor's estate 2 days later. Her Bentley glided up the driveway. She stepped out in a Chanel suit, her expression glacial. Chloe was on the lanai when Victoria entered, uninvited. The morning light was warm on her skin. "May I have a word?" Victoria asked, though it was not a question. She was already seated. "No, you may not, Chloe, please. We must be rational about this." "I am being rational. Your son is the one who has not been, but please say your piece." Victoria sat stiffly. "Our family has survived far worse than a small marital spat. Divorce is such a drastic step. Think of your son. He needs 2 parents. My son needs a father who is honorable. He deserves more than what Liam can offer. Liam made a mistake. All men do. It's an unfortunate part of life. We don't discard a marriage over a silly fling. A silly fling." The words tasted like ash. 18 months, a secret condo, an aborted pregnancy, and a legal document to strip your pregnant daughter-in-law of her assets. Is that your definition of silly? Victoria's perfect mask twitched. Fear flickered in her eyes. "I have no idea what you mean about any documents. Liam adores you." "Liam adores himself. I was convenient. Isabella was new. We weren't even people to him, just props in his grand narrative." Eleanor's polished composure finally fractured, revealing something venomous. "You foolish girl. Do you realize how fortunate you were to marry into the Vance family? The world that opened for you? All the doors you could never have unlocked. And this is our thanks." "Your thanks?" Amelia felt a switch flip inside her. The last bits of fear evaporated, replaced by a searing heat. "I was a devoted wife. I was steadfast and trusting, and I bought every fantasy your son sold me. I shelved my own career for his. I left my entire family behind to help him build his empire. I suffered through 2 miscarriages while he was too consumed with work to even be there." She rose to her feet. Eleanor recoiled slightly. "And my reward? A husband sleeping with his project manager before we'd even been married 2 years. In-laws who knew everything and helped him orchestrate the deception. A family that looked me in the eye and lied consistently for over a year. We were looking out for Liam. That's what family does. You were looking out for yourselves, for your reputation, for your perfect public image. Amelia stepped forward. You never cared about me. I was just the wife, the vessel for your heir, just another property in the Vance portfolio. Eleanor stood, her perfect mask now shattered. Rage replaced her icy calm. You'll come to regret this. Without the Vance name, our resources, our influence, you're irrelevant. Your child is irrelevant. You'll spend your life scraping by while Liam finds someone more suitable. My child is Hazel. She has never been irrelevant, and she will grow up knowing the true character of her father's family. Eleanor's hand lifted as if to strike her. She checked the impulse, lowering her arm. I came here to negotiate a truce, to find an arrangement. That was clearly a waste of my energy. Yes, it was. Please go. Eleanor left without another word, her Porsche tearing down the driveway and kicking up stones. Amelia collapsed into the chair, her hands shaking, her heart hammering. Yet deep down, she felt a sliver of something like triumph. She had finally spoken her truth, said the words she'd swallowed for years. 3 days later, Ethan Cole found her. He cornered Amelia in the parking garage of her lawyer's building as she was heading to her car. Ethan was sweating in the crisp November air, his designer suit a mess. His tie was askew, his gaze darted around, terrified of being seen with her. We need to talk, he urged, somewhere we won't be seen. It's vital. Why would I talk to you? You're Liam's business partner. You must have known about Chloe. I knew, he admitted. I'm not proud of it. But what I have to tell you is far bigger than his affair. They sat inside Amelia's car, engine idling, the heat blasting. The windows began to fog. The entire development firm is a house of cards, Ethan said, his voice a strained whisper, the kind of mess that gets the feds involved. Amelia's stomach twisted into a knot. What kind of mess? Liam's been using escrow funds from one project to cover the massive losses on another. He's faking progress reports to keep the lenders happy. The total liability is at least $42 million, probably more. $42 million. Amelia had co-signed on business loans for 4 years. She had given Liam her complete trust with their finances. She never once questioned the papers he slid in front of her. She just signed on the dotted line, believing him. Am I liable? She asked, her voice thin. For what he did? Ethan paused. That's why I'm here. I had to give you a heads up. If this divorce gets ugly, if the banks start digging into the firm's books, you have to insulate yourself. How? Hire a forensic accountant, someone to detangle your personal assets from his business. Document your complete lack of involvement in his financial dealings. Prove you were kept out of the loop. I was kept out of the loop on everything, Amelia said, the bitterness sharp. My whole marriage was a lie. Ethan stared out the windshield, his jaw clenched. Guilt washed over his face. There's something else, something I really shouldn't be telling you. Tell me. 6 months ago, Liam talked about getting more life insurance. He claimed it was just smart business planning, to have protection if anything happened to either of you. I know about that one. My father's PI found it. Did you know he took out a second policy? A different carrier? Another $2 million? Amelia felt a chill spread through her. $4 million total, $4 million in coverage taken out just 6 months ago, right after Chloe had her pregnancy scare, right when Liam started working late more often. Why are you telling me this? She demanded. Liam's your best friend, your partner. Ethan was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy. I have 2 little girls, 6 and 8, and all I can think about is what I would pray someone would do for them. If they were the ones being lied to and used, and God knows what else Liam is capable of. He got out of the car without looking back, vanishing into the garage, and leaving Amelia with the crushing weight of his words. That night, the news broke. A source from the architecture firm must have leaked it. Or maybe a society blogger with good contacts. A local gossip site ran it first, then it was picked up by a Chicago news affiliate, and then it went national. Real estate tycoon evicts pregnant wife for mistress. The headline was inescapable. Amelia's picture was suddenly on every screen. Her name was trending online. Her private nightmare had become public sport. She watched from her parents' house as strangers picked apart her life, critiqued her looks, and passed judgment on her choices, deciding her fate based on a single, sordid headline. Her phone became unusable, flooded with texts and calls. She silenced her phone and shoved it into a nightstand. In the ensuite, she clung to the marble countertop, staring at her own reflection. Her mascara had run, leaving black trails on her skin. She looked precisely how she felt, shattered, exposed, and fragile. "I'm still here," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I'm still standing. They haven't broken me. They won't break me." But as the words left her lips, a part of her wondered if she was lying to herself. The darkness settled in at 2:14 in the morning. Amelia lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of her childhood room, the same antique prints of Chicago landmarks she'd hung up as a teenager. The shelves were still filled with her old architecture books. The same window overlooked the yard where she and Liam had their wedding 4 years prior. Sleep was impossible. The baby, Hazel, was restless inside her, growing stronger, getting ready for a world that now felt treacherous. Amelia's thoughts were a whirlwind. The jewelry receipts, the fraudulent loan applications, the insurance policies, the vicious headline, Eleanor's cruel gaze, Liam's cold smirk, Ethan's stark warning. $4 million in life insurance on a healthy 29-year-old woman. What was Liam's end game? Amelia got out of bed, pulling on a faded university sweatshirt, and walked barefoot through the quiet house. The house smelled of lemon polish and her mother's baking, the scent of a safety she no longer possessed. She ended up in her father's study, the room smelling of leather and old blueprints, a scent unchanged from her earliest memories. She took her parents' wedding album from a low shelf. She turned the pages, seeing her mother in an elegant gown, her father in a sharp tuxedo. They were so young, so full of hope, unaware of the storms they would have to weather together. The recessions, the illnesses, the moments they had to fight for each other. But they'd survived. 28 years and still going. Amelia flipped to pictures of herself. First tooth, first day of school, her awkward teen years, her university graduation. In every single photo, her father looked at her with the exact same expression. Overwhelming pride, fierce protection, and pure love. The look of a man who would tear down the world for his daughter. That was what a father should be. That was what Hazel deserved. But Liam would never look at their child that way. Liam wasn't capable of that love. He'd made that devastatingly clear. Amelia remembered his proposal. A table at a restaurant overlooking the city's skyline, champagne that cost more than her rent, an emerald-cut ring that gleamed in the moonlight. That night, she had wept with joy and hope. She thought herself the most fortunate woman alive. Now tears fell again, but these were born of sorrow, fury, and disgrace. Her phone vibrated. She'd powered it on for urgent contacts. A notification flashed. A link to a secure server. Vance Architecture Internal Audit. Amelia clicked it. The file opened. A spreadsheet detailed transfers from a hidden corporate account. Millions. All directed to a woman named Chloe. He sat across from her at their polished dining table, a picture of calm concern. His look was sincere, worried, kind. "Amelia, you're going through a monumental change," he told her, his voice smooth and rehearsed. "Hormones can cause paranoia, anxiety, flights of fancy. I love you, and I know we can navigate this difficult time together." Amelia heard her husband brand her as delusional, unstable, and irrational. He smiled at her. The same captivating smile from their wedding day, the one that made her agree to move her life to Chicago for him. She pictured his family, their voices echoing in her head. She likely pushed him away. Pregnant women can be so demanding. Every couple has their issues. He's such a patient husband to put up with her moods, a classic case of baby brain making her see things that aren't there. Her agony was dismissed. Her shame was invalidated. The people she trusted were defining her reality, judging her pain based on the carefully crafted lies of the man who had shattered her world. Amelia powered down the phone, covered her face with her hands, and let the quiet darkness consume her. The sobs racked her body, a storm in her chest. She wept for the partnership she believed in, for the man she thought she knew, for the future they had designed that now lay in ruins. She wept for the trusting woman who had given up her art gallery, her city, and her autonomy for a man who was funding his assistant's life before their first anniversary was even over. She cried until she was empty. And then there was only silence. The grandfather clock ticked. The baby stirred inside her. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 powerful shifts. The kicks of a fighter. Oliver, refusing to let his mother crumble. "I know, little one," Amelia whispered, her voice fractured and hoarse. "I know this isn't what you deserve. You didn't choose to enter this disaster. You deserve a father who doesn't treat his family like a disposable project." The baby shifted again. 9. "But I'll make you a vow. I will be enough for us. I'll be your mother, your guardian, and your loudest cheerleader. I will give you all the loyalty Liam can't." She picked up a framed photo from the mantelpiece. It was one of her as a toddler, held securely in her father's arms. His smile was brilliant. His gaze was pure love. And maybe, one day, we'll find someone who can love us properly. Someone dependable, someone loyal, someone who cherishes us for exactly who we are. The baby gave one last kick. 10. Amelia laid a hand on her stomach, feeling the tiny pressure against her palm. "I'm so sorry I made the wrong choice. I'm sorry I was blind to what was happening. But I'll choose better for us now. Beginning tonight, with just you and me." The clock on the wall showed 4:15 in the morning. Through the window, the first streak of dawn painted the sky. The shadows were starting to recede. A new day was breaking. And for the first time since Liam had told her she was imagining things, Amelia felt more than just despair. She felt resolve. She felt a deep inner strength. She felt the delicate beginnings of hope. The most difficult part of this ordeal wasn't losing Liam. The most difficult part was realizing she had lost herself while trying to please him. But she was still here, still breathing, still a mother-to-be. And tomorrow she would begin the arduous journey of rediscovering the woman she was meant to be. 1 week later, the situation escalated. Amelia sat in her father's study, the same room where she had wept in the dark. The room smelled of cedar, old leather, and security. But today it was crowded. Her divorce lawyer, a formidable woman named Sarah Blackwood, known for dismantling the finances of wealthy men, sat beside a forensic accountant, Mr. Davies, an expert in uncovering corporate malfeasance. A private investigator was also present, along with her parents, who flanked her like guardians. "The circumstances are graver than we first thought," Sarah stated. She arranged documents on the large desk, building permits, bank records, supplier invoices. "Liam's firm is engaged in systemic fraud. He's been substituting subpar materials in his projects for at least 18 months. $5 million, Mr. Davies added. His tone was all business. "That's our conservative estimate of the funds he's diverted by overbilling clients. The network of shell companies obscures the full amount." $5 million. Amelia had co-signed business loans for 2 years. She could be implicated in a scheme she had no knowledge of. Her name was on incorporation documents she had never properly reviewed. Her signature was on forms Liam had simply told her to sign. "What's my legal exposure?" Amelia asked. "That will depend on how the district attorney proceeds," Sarah explained. "If they argue you were a knowing participant, you could face severe civil and even criminal penalties. But we will mount a vigorous defense showing you were deliberately excluded from the firm's finances." "Because I was," Amelia said. "Liam always said the business side was too complex for me to worry about. Then we proved that. We demonstrate you were a victim of his manipulations, not a partner in his crimes. Mr. Davies slid another file across the desk. Amelia recognized the cover sheet. Their insurance portfolio. There is more troubling information here, the accountant said. We found 2 more policies not disclosed in your initial paperwork. A total of 4 policies, each for $750,000, all initiated in the same 2-week window 3 months ago. $3 million, all on Amelia's life with Liam as the sole beneficiary. A heavy silence fell over the room. What are you implying? Her mother asked, her voice strained. Are you suggesting Liam intended to— I am not making any specific allegations, Mr. Davies said cautiously, but the timing is suspicious. The policies were taken out right after he broke ground on the Lakeview Tower, the project with the most significant fraud. Right when his financial exposure became critical. A chill spread through Amelia, despite the warm study. Her husband had insured her life for $3 million, just as his business dealings became criminally fraudulent, just when he was most desperate. What was his plan? We must contact law enforcement, her father said, his voice firm, his face ashen. This has moved beyond a family law issue. I agree, Sarah said. I have a contact in the DA's white-collar crime unit. I can make a discreet inquiry. The meeting went on for another 2 hours. They debated strategies, set timelines, and arranged for protective orders. When it was over, Amelia was bone-tired. Her head throbbed, her back ached. Oliver was kicking relentlessly, but underneath the exhaustion, a new feeling was taking root. Certainty. She went outside after they all departed. She sat on a stone bench in the garden, the very bench where Liam had proposed to her, the very spot where they had recited their vows. Her phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. She answered it regardless. Amelia? It's Chloe. The voice was weak and fearful, a stark contrast to the confident woman she'd imagined. Why are you calling me? I have to see you. Please. I have information for you. Things I should have reported a long time ago. Why would you ever help me? You've been with my husband for a year. A long silence, then the sound of a shaky breath. Because he fooled me too. About everything. About you. About a future for us. And I want him to answer for what he did to us both. Against the advice of her counsel, Amelia arranged a meeting. 3 days later, they sat in a small cafe on the outskirts of the city where they wouldn't be recognized. Chloe seemed smaller now, without Liam's presence to bolster her. She looked young and scared. She had on no makeup and her hair was in a messy bun. Her eyes were puffy and red. He swore he was leaving you, Chloe said, her voice shaking, after the baby arrived. He said you'd get a fair settlement and he and I would be together. We were going to start over. He swore he loved me. And you fell for it. I was an idiot. Tears streamed down Chloe's face. I was 23 when he brought me onto his team. I was new to Chicago. I didn't know anyone. He was brilliant and powerful, and he paid attention to me. He paid attention to me, too, once. He said your marriage was just a business arrangement, that you were staying together for public image, that the love was long gone. Amelia recalled the nights she'd rolled over to an empty side of the bed, the mornings he'd turned his cheek when she tried to kiss him, the slow, painful death of their connection, for which she had always blamed herself. He told me the opposite, Amelia said softly. He told me our marriage was fine and that I was the one creating problems. Chloe wiped at her tears. He convinced me to end the pregnancy. Did you know about that? He said he couldn't handle 2 children at once, that it would ruin the timing of his company's IPO. He said we had to wait. Her voice cracked. I was 12 weeks along. I saw the little heartbeat on the monitor, and he made me get rid of our baby because it was inconvenient for his business. Olivia felt a strange, unwelcome feeling. Not pity, not forgiveness. Recognition? Chloe was just another pawn in his game, manipulated differently, but a casualty all the same. He shattered both of us, Olivia said, her voice barely a whisper. For different reasons in different ways, but he shattered us. Yes, he did. So what proof do you have? What can help my case? Chloe took out a small flash drive and slid it across the cafe table toward Olivia. He told me everything about his financial troubles, the dummy corporations, his plan to vanish if the SEC got too close. He actually thought I'd run away with him. He assumed I was that naive. Olivia plugged the drive into her tablet. She scrolled through encrypted files, falsified investor reports, account numbers in the Cayman Islands, names of co-conspirators. It was a complete roadmap of his fraud. "Why are you showing me this?" Olivia asked. "Because I want a new life. I want to disappear somewhere he will never, ever find me. Somewhere I can have a future not built on his web of deceit, and you believe I can arrange that?" Chloe finally met her gaze. For the first time, Olivia saw beyond the affair, beyond the other woman. She saw a terrified young intern who made a catastrophic mistake and was now desperate to escape the fallout. "I think you're the only one who can," Chloe whispered. "You have money, powerful connections, a father people respect. And you have every possible reason to want to see Liam completely destroyed." Olivia paused, considering the woman who had helped wreck her marriage, the woman who had been with her husband, and she saw herself, a woman who had been played, used, and was about to be cast aside when she was no longer useful, just like Olivia. "I'll have my attorneys review this," Olivia said at last. "If this information is as damaging as you claim, then we can discuss a solution." Chloe's entire body slumped in relief. "Thank you," she breathed out. "I'm aware I don't deserve any kindness from you. I know I deserve nothing. You're right, you don't deserve it," Olivia said, standing and pulling on her coat. "But Liam deserves what's coming to him far more. And right now, that's good enough for me." That night, Olivia sat with her parents in their study. Chloe's files were displayed on the large monitor, encrypted emails, offshore bank statements, chat logs, everything Liam had fought to keep hidden. Her mother, Eleanor, poured her a cup of chamomile tea but said nothing. Her father, Alistair, analyzed the data on the screen, his jaw set. His eyes were sharp. "This is it," he said finally. "With this and what our private investigator uncovered, the district attorney has everything. Liam is going to prison." "Good," Eleanor said, her voice like steel. Olivia was silent, staring at the digital trail of her husband's crimes and betrayals, but she no longer felt fury, not sadness, not even relief. She felt something that had been gone for months: power. For the first time since that awful night she found the receipt for the other woman's necklace, she wasn't just reacting to Liam's choices. She was making her own, directing the strategy, building the case, and planning a future that he was not a part of. She began mentally creating lists: people to call, assets to freeze, steps to take. She was planning, acting, not just reacting. This was the woman she'd been before Liam, before the marriage that had slowly chipped away at her self-worth. She was rediscovering that person, and it felt like returning home. 3 weeks later, Liam Sterling collapsed in his office. A ruptured brain aneurysm. The paramedics found him on the floor, surrounded by his legal team and 2 FBI agents serving a subpoena. They took him to UCSF Medical Center, the same hospital where his daughter was scheduled to be born, the same hospital Olivia had vowed never to set foot in again. Olivia got the news from her mother. She was 34 weeks pregnant, tired and swollen. The baby, a girl, was perfectly healthy. She was living in a small condo her parents owned, surrounded by their constant care. "Liam's mother just called your father," Eleanor said, her voice carefully measured. "Liam is in critical condition. He needs immediate, complex surgery. And what does that have to do with Dad?" Eleanor paused. "The aneurysm has bled extensively in a very difficult location. The chief of neurosurgery has consulted with specialists up and down the coast. Your father is the only surgeon in the state with the specific skill set to perform this operation." Olivia felt the room start to spin. Her father. The man who had spent months uncovering Liam's treachery. The man who had watched his own daughter crumble. The man who had every reason to let Liam die was now the only one who could save him. What did Dad say? He said he would be there in 20 minutes. Olivia met her father in the entryway of their home. He was already putting on his jacket, car keys in his hand. "You can't be serious," she said. Alistair stopped and turned to look at his daughter. "He destroyed me, Dad," Olivia said, her voice trembling. "He nearly destroyed our baby. He took out insurance policies on me. He was planning to leave us with nothing. And you're just going to go save his life?" "Yes. Why? Why on earth would you do that for him?" Alistair was silent for a moment. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, casting long shadows. He looked exhausted, older than she had ever seen him. "Because 32 years ago I took an oath," he said simply. "An oath to do no harm, to save a life whenever possible. Liam's life is valuable, even if the man himself is not. I can't be the only reason." Alistair moved closer, placing his hands on his daughter's shoulders. He looked into her eyes. "Your daughter is going to grow up one day. She'll be old enough to ask about her father, old enough to understand the kind of person he was. I know, I'm dreading it. She will learn about the cheating, the lies, the financial crimes, everything. We will not lie to her to protect Liam's memory." "Good. But she's also going to learn what happened tonight. She's going to learn that her grandfather was faced with a choice. He could have just let that man die on an operating table, and no one in the world would have blamed him for it. They might have even called it justice." Alistair's voice was firm, the voice of a man whose mind was made up. But instead, her grandfather saved him. Not for Liam. Not because he deserved an ounce of mercy, but because that's what our family does. We do not become monsters to fight other monsters. We don't throw away our morals when it's convenient. Olivia felt the wetness of tears on her face. She hadn't realized she'd started crying. "I'm going with you," she said. "I need to see this. I need to see how the story ends." Alistair paused. "You should be resting. The baby is fine, I'm fine, but I have to see this through to the end." He gave a slow nod. "Then let's go." They drove to the hospital in silence, down the same streets Olivia knew so well, toward the building her life was now tied to. Liam was in pre-op when they got there. He was as white as the sheets, looking terrified and small, hooked up to a dozen monitors. His mother clutched his hand, her usually perfect composure gone. His father paced the room like a trapped animal. When Liam saw Alistair enter, his expression shifted from relief to fear to shame, and finally to a desperate, pathetic hope. You're my surgeon?" His voice was a weak, thin whisper. "I am. Why? After what I did to your daughter, after everything I put all of you through, why would you save me?" Alistair pulled on his surgical mask and gloves, meeting Liam's gaze with a calm, steady look. "Because my granddaughter will grow up and know that her grandfather saved the man who tried to ruin her mother, not for his sake, but for hers. So she will never have to question whether her family is capable of showing compassion even when it is completely undeserved." Liam's composure shattered. Real, racking sobs shook his body. "I'm so sorry," he cried. "Oh God, I am so sorry for everything. I'm not the one you need to say that to." Olivia stepped forward into Liam's field of vision. He stared at her, at her pregnant belly, at the child he had been willing to discard, at the woman he had betrayed. "Olivia, Her voice was like ice, sharp and clear and absolute. "Don't you dare apologize to me now, not when you're terrified, not when you think your life is over." An apology made out of fear is meaningless. Please, if you make it through this, if you actually get a second chance, then you can try to make things right. You can prove with your actions that you are a different man. But not now. Not with words. Not like this. She turned her back on him and walked to the waiting room. From a distance, she could hear Julian's faint words to Marcus. Something like gratitude. Something like an admission he was unworthy. It was true, he was. But that wasn't what mattered. The operation lasted 7 hours. Alara spent them in the quiet hospital chapel, the same one where her world had collapsed 3 weeks prior. The stained glass windows were now just dark panes. Her mother, Isabel, sat with her in silence. Her friend Chloe brought coffee and a steady presence. Even Sienna appeared, a ghost in a back pew, mute. They were all just waiting, watching the hands of the clock crawl. At 1:37 in the morning, Marcus appeared in his scrubs, his face etched with fatigue but his eyes sharp. "He'll make it." Genevieve Croft crumpled, sobbing with relief. Julian's brother Leo leaned against the wall, drained. Alara just gave a slow nod, feeling nothing. Not joy, not sadness, just over. "Did he say anything?" she asked. "Before the anesthesia. He wanted me to tell you something." "What?" Marcus chose his words with care. "He said he knows forgiveness is impossible. He can't change what happened. But he hoped one day you'd believe his remorse was real." Alara considered it. The words of a dying man, desperate and grasping. "Maybe," she said at last. "Years from now, maybe, but not soon." Marcus wrapped an arm around her, a rare gesture from her stoic father. "That's a start," he said. "For now, it's a start." They left the hospital, father and daughter stepping into the frigid Chicago night. The sky above was clear, filled with countless sharp, brilliant stars. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing me what grace is even when it's painful." "Grace isn't weakness," Marcus said. "It is the most difficult kind of strength, and you have it." Alara wasn't sure. Not now, but perhaps she would be someday. Julian survived. His company did not. The DOJ moved with shocking speed. Federal indictments landed just weeks after his release. Securities fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement. The proof was irrefutable. Sienna's digital files, a partner's testimony, and a digital trail across a dozen shell corporations. Julian's own arrogant, careless emails laid out his crimes. His legal team tried to cut a deal, offering up names for a lighter sentence. It wasn't nearly enough. Julian Croft was looking at 15 to 20 years. The feds froze his assets. Marshals seized his properties. His partners flipped, one after another, fleeing the wreckage. The Croft family's tech dynasty, built over 2 generations, vanished. Genevieve Croft made one last, desperate call to Isabel. Her voice was thin. "We are connected," Genevieve pleaded. "Think of Aurora. Do you want her father to be a felon? Do you want that shame on her?" Isabel's reply became family lore. "My granddaughter's father will be the man Alara chooses next. Julian was just a biological footnote. And honestly, Genevieve, prison is kinder than what he deserves." She disconnected the call. Alara went into labor a month later, at 38 weeks. Perfect. Her water broke at 2:17 in the afternoon while she was making tea in her small apartment. By 3, she was checked in. By 6, fully dilated. By 7, she was in the throes of contractions that felt like they were tearing her apart. Marcus wasn't in the room. Too many ghosts in that hospital. Too many awful memories haunted those halls. He paced outside, a nervous wreck. But Isabel was there, holding Alara's hand, breathing with her, wiping her brow. And Chloe was there, her best friend, her rock. "You can do this, Alara," Chloe said, her voice a calm anchor. "You are so close. One more, just one more push and you'll meet her." Alara bore down, every muscle screaming, her lungs on fire. And then a sound, a cry, not her own, a tiny new voice. The most incredible sound she had ever known. At 8:43 in the evening, Aurora Isabel Vance was born. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, 10 perfect fingers and toes. A tiny mouth that opened to protest the cold, bright room. Alara held her daughter, gazing into her unfocused eyes, and felt a love so immense it left no room for anything else. No anger, no grief, no fear, just this. "Hello, Aurora," Alara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm your mommy. I have waited my whole life for you." Julian wasn't there. He was under house arrest in his high-rise condo, ankle monitor on, awaiting his sentencing. He sent 3 dozen white lilies to the hospital. The card read, "To my daughter." Alara had a nurse take them to the neonatal intensive care unit. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Alara got nothing from Julian. There was nothing left. The government had taken it all to repay the victims of his schemes. They would get pennies on the dollar. There was nothing left for an ex-wife. But she didn't need his money. She had a small home near her parents, with a little garden for Aurora to play in. She returned to work not at a gallery, but founding a small nonprofit. It helped emerging female artists, women who had faced down their own hardships and were creating beauty from pain. The work had meaning. It was hers. The scandal that had consumed the city faded, replaced by the next one. But something else began to grow. Women began to contact Alara, first dozens, then hundreds, from across the nation and the world. They told her their stories of betrayal, of survival, of husbands who cheated without consequence, of families that enabled toxicity, of losing themselves in a partnership that ate away at their soul, of discovering a strength they never knew. Alara read every single message. Late at night, with Aurora sleeping, she would sit and write back, "You are not alone. You are not crazy. You can get through this." She started a foundation to help women escape financial abuse and rebuild. She transformed her deepest wound into her life's work. Every day she looked at Aurora, the daughter who gave her a reason to keep going, the child who had saved her before she was even born. "Thank you," she'd whisper to the sleeping infant. "Thank you for finding me." 2 years later, Alara Hayes stood on a stage. The ballroom was sold out. 500 women sat before her, with more lining the walls. Survivors. Women who were told they were overreacting, too emotional. Women who had lost it all and fought their way back. Women like her. The stage lights were hot. The microphone carried her voice to every corner of the room. "I used to believe my story was about the man who betrayed me," Alara said, her voice clear and steady. "About a burner phone I found by accident. About a mistress I never knew existed. About a husband who was a criminal, a fraud, a stranger." She paused, letting the words hang in the air as she looked out at the sea of faces. But I was wrong. The room was silent. My story is not about Julian Croft. It's not about what he took from me. It's not about the lies, the betrayal, or the stolen money. She took a deep breath. My story is about the woman I became when everything was stripped away. A woman who realized that losing the wrong man meant she could finally become the right version of herself. A woman who learned she was stronger than she thought, braver than she knew, and more resilient than anyone ever gave her credit for. The applause began with a single person, then two, then a dozen, until the entire room was on its feet. 500 women clapping, some weeping, all of them understanding. Alara stepped away from the podium. She let the gallery's applause wash over her. A poised woman, Victoria, approached, her elegant facade cracking. Clara braced for the usual venom from her ex-mother-in-law. "I need to say I'm sorry." Clara remained silent. "I knew about Marcus and Simone, about the accounts, all of it." Victoria's voice wavered. "I chose my son over what was right. It's too late, I know, but I had to tell you." Victoria dabbed at her ruined makeup. "You were my family. And Lily, I failed you completely." Clara recalled the woman who enabled Marcus's infidelity, who funded his getaways with Simone while calling Clara difficult. "Thank you for saying that," Clara said, her voice even. "Can you ever forgive me?" The question lingered. "I honestly don't know," Clara replied. "Maybe someday, just not now." Victoria nodded, relief softening her features. "That's more than I deserve." She vanished into the celebrating artists. Later, at her parents' Friday night dinner, a new tradition, Clara felt at peace. Lily, her 2-year-old, stumbled with fierce determination across the rug, a bundle of endless energy. She had her mother's grit and her grandmother's spirit. She fell and rose again and again. Her father, Henry, smiled. "She has your drive." Clara laughed. "You mean my stubbornness." "Same difference." The doorbell chimed. Clara opened it to Leo, holding a bouquet, a gentle smile on his face. He was an urban botanist, 38, with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair. He'd designed the gallery's rooftop garden and treated Lily's first seasonal allergy 8 months prior. He had asked for her number then. She'd said no. And again? The third time she finally agreed. He was patient and saw her, not just her past. "I hope I'm not early," he said. "You're perfect." He entered, and Lily immediately demanded to be held. He lifted her high, making her shriek with joy. Clara watched them. This man who knew her public story but still showed up, who sent a card saying he was sorry for her pain. Her mother Eleanor gave her a knowing look. Henry's quiet approval was clear. Clara remembered the woman in the architect's office 3 years ago, dismissed as overly emotional. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, forged in betrayal. Someone who knew her own worth and wasn't afraid to claim it. After dinner, she stood on the balcony overlooking the city lights. Leo joined her, his hand resting on her arm. "What's on your mind?" "Everything and nothing." He waited. He was so good at waiting. "I once thought discovering Marcus's affair was the worst day of my life. Finding out about Simone, my whole world just imploded. But now I realize it was the best thing that ever happened to me." She faced him. "It was the day I began writing my own story, not living his." Lily ran to them, hugging Clara's leg. Clara scooped her up, inhaling the scent of her daughter's hair. Lily had Marcus's dark curls, but her grandfather's kind eyes and Clara's resolve. She was a product of love and loss. "I love you, my girl," Clara whispered. Lily patted her cheek. "Love you, Mommy." 3 words worth more than all of Marcus's stolen millions, more than anything he ever offered. Clara looked at Leo, at her parents, at the warm, loving home around her. Her mother once said, "The right person makes room for all of you." Marcus had demanded she shrink to fit into his life. Lily needed her to grow bigger, stronger, and braver. She chose the one who chose her back. Standing in the doorway of her new reality, daughter in her arms, future stretching ahead, Clara knew. Some things are worth losing everything for. Starting over was one. Lily looked up, her eyes bright, and Clara saw this wasn't an ending at all. It was the start she had fought for, earned through fire and the courage to leave it all behind. This was the beginning of her real life. Clara's journey shows that hitting rock bottom can be the foundation for finding your true self. If her story of resilience resonated with you, I would be honored to hear about it. Leave a comment telling me which part moved you. And for more tales of strength, survival, and justice, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss a thing. Thank you for being here. Talk to you next time.